Welcome to Macbeth Act 2, Scene 2. You have a poll question to begin. Do you think the murder will go according to the plan? And the plan is the one that Lady Macbeth comes up with back in Act 1. If you are not remembering exactly what that plan was, remember they were going to have a party, everybody was going to drink, she was going to give Duncan's servants, kind of the men that watch him, they're almost like his bodyguards. She was going to get them very, very drunk. They were going to go murder Duncan and then blame it on his guards, which not very good bodyguards if that's how it's going to go. Now, I am going to be playing the recording and going through this scene, but I'm going to be stopping it far more often to explain what's going on than I've done with other scenes. So if you would prefer to just listen to the recording and work through this scene on your own, I totally understand because I am going to be talking about a lot of stuff. Just remember you can find the link to the Folgers recordings if you want to use them, posted in your syllabus. Otherwise, I hope that this will clarify what's going on in the scene. This is one of the most important scenes in the play, and I want to make sure you guys really understand what's going on, the language that Shakespeare is using, and why he's using that language, because what happens in this scene is really going to determine what happens in the rest of the play. Also, it's Lady Macbeth doing her Lady Macbeth thing, and you know I'm biased and I love her so much, even though she is very clearly, got that evil streak running through her. So, this assignment direction up here is here for a reason. Pay attention to how he selects what you see and don't see. Now, in most Shakespeare plays, much of the murders happen off stage, and then characters come in and tell the other characters slash us as the audience what happened. So I will tell you right now, Duncan dies during this scene. Spoiler alert. We will not see his murder. It will happen off stage. Now, in some film versions, they will show his murder. I'm going to be putting together some of my favorite clips from Act 1 and Act 2 in different movie versions for you guys to kind of see the different interpretations of these scenes. And in a few of them, the murder of Duncan is shown. In others, it's not. So you can think about what would be effective, but you also have to keep in mind the time period of this play, what effects Shakespeare and his troupe would have been able to pull off, and doing all of these murders on stage would have been very, very difficult. So we open in the court of Macbeth's castle with Lady Macbeth. She, in her first line, will tell us that which hath made them drunk hath made me bold, meaning she is intoxicated right now. And saying that, maybe she would not be doing all of these things, but she's drunk, she's bold, she's on fire, she's ready to go. So we are going to see how this scene plays out.
That which hath made them drunk hath made me bold. What hath quenched them hath given me fire. Hark! Peace. It was the owl that shrieked, the fatal bellman which gives the sternst good night. He is about it. The doors are open, and the surfeited grooms do mock their charge with snores. I have drugged their possets, that death and nature do contend about them, whether they live or die.
Now, Lady Macbeth not only has she, given them alcohol, but she's put something in their drinks that's basically going to make them sleep really heavily. She's not trying to kill them, she's not trying to poison them, but she is trying to make sure that they will sleep through anything that happens this evening. But you notice, and maybe you can hear it in her voice as well, she's very, very nervous right now. She hears a noise, that's why she goes, "Hark, peace." Oh, okay, it was just an owl. But if you want to get a little bit more in depth, feel free to look up, what an owl might be as a symbol, but also think about the witch's familiars. We had a cat, a toad, and Harpier, the owl. So perhaps this is supposed to be a hint that the witches are somehow involved in this. But she's very, very nervous. She's very anxious. Every sound is going to scare her. And Macbeth is going to react the same way. So when he calls out, she is going to be extra nervous, and then we're going to see Macbeth.
Who's there? What ho?
Alack, I'm afraid they have awaked, and 'tis not done. The attempt and not the deed confounds us. Hark! I laid their daggers ready. He could not miss 'em. Had he not resembled my father as he slept, I had done't.
So she says, I put the daggers out. Like, seriously, my husband, oh my gosh, if they woke up and he didn't do it, my husband's an idiot. I put the daggers literally right there. He couldn't miss them. And then she pauses and says, had he not resembled my father as he slept, talking about Duncan, I had done it, meaning I would have killed Duncan myself. But he reminded me of my dad, and I don't want to kill my dad. So Macbeth is going to enter with bloody daggers. What is the problem with Macbeth entering with the bloody daggers? Remember when I said he's not very smart and Lady Macbeth is the brains of the operation? Yeah, he shouldn't have brought the daggers back with him because they're, a murder weapon. Lady Macbeth will also have that same reaction to it. But pay attention to how nervous they are, the things they're talking about. Even though they, put on a good facade, and Lady Macbeth is this big, bold woman in Act One, when it comes time to actually do the murder, you can tell that this isn't what they're used to doing. So even though clearly they're fine with doing it at the end of the day, there is still some apprehension. This is a new thing for them. This is not something they are used to doing. And Macbeth has killed many, many people in battle. If you think back to the description of how he kills MacDonald at the beginning of the play, he literally stabs him in the belly button, rips his sword all the way up through, basically cutting out all of his insides, cuts the guy's head off. It's a violent, violent death. But when it comes time to do something like this, it impacts both of them very differently.
My husband?
I have done the deed. Didst thou not hear a noise?
I heard the owl scream and the crickets cry. Did not you speak?
When?
Now.
As I descended?
I.
Hark! Who lies in the second chamber?
Donalbain.
This is a sorry sight.
A foolish thought to say a sorry sight.
There's one did laugh in his sleep, and one cried murder, that they did wake each other. I stood and heard them, but they did say their prayers and address them again to sleep.
There are two lodged together.
One cried, God bless us, and amen, the other, as they had seen me with these hangman's hands, listening their fear. I could not say amen when they did say, God bless us.
Consider it not so deeply.
But
So Macbeth is telling Lady Macbeth what happened when he did it. He says the grooms, the guards, he says they woke up a little bit, they started saying things. One of them yelled out murder, one of them said God bless us, another one said amen. He's panicking, they've seen me with these hangman's hands, meaning hands that have murdered someone. I mean, he just stabbed someone to death. He's covered in blood right now. And she goes, well, consider it not so deeply. He says, but why couldn't I say amen? And if you're thinking from a religious perspective, well, he just committed murder, so maybe God has turned his back on him. But Lady Macbeth keeps saying, don't think about it so much. As you guys would say, it's not that deep. I mean, she literally says, consider it not so deeply. But really, it is a huge moment. This is a big step away from what Macbeth has been up to this point. So for Lady Macbeth to say, don't think about it so much, it doesn't necessarily mean that she's heartless and callous to it, but if they think about it too much, it's going to become a problem for them. And Macbeth is going to be stuck on this moment of like, why couldn't I say amen? Am I an evil person now?
wherefore could not I pronounce amen? I had most need of blessing, and amen stuck in my throat.
These deeds must not be thought after these ways, so it will make us mad.
Don't think about it. It will make us mad. It will make us go crazy. Oops, didn't mean to hit translate. Foreshadowing.
Methought I heard a voice cry, sleep no more. Macbeth does murder sleep. The innocent sleep. Sleep that knits up the ravelled sleeve of care. The death of each day's life, sore labour's bath, balm of hurt minds, great nature's second course, chief nourisher in life's feast.
What do you mean?
Still, it cried, sleep no more. To all the house, Glamis hath murdered sleep, and therefore Cawdor shall sleep no more. Macbeth shall sleep no more.
Now, I've always loved that line in this play, and it's pretty famous too. Sleep no more, Macbeth does murder sleep. Sleep is supposed to be an innocent moment. You're supposed to be safe. You are resting from the day. And so, for a man that has only ever killed during battle, where it is very active and people are choosing to participate, well, choosing is kind of a rough word, there were slaves, but it's not so much of I'm going to bed and I haven't done anything and I'm going to be killed in my sleep. And so for this, he is so stuck on it. And he says, I heard a voice cry out. Now, there's probably not someone in the house yelling what he says he's heard, but maybe their witches are involved. Maybe his imagination is getting ahead of him. And it says, Glamis hath murdered sleep. Remember, Glamis, the Thane of Glamis, was Macbeth's first title. Therefore, Cawdor shall sleep no more. Thane of Cawdor is the title Macbeth was awarded with from the king. Macbeth shall sleep no more. So we're still sticking with that idea of threes. You know, the witches come in threes, the prophecies come in threes, all these phrases they're using come in threes. And basically, he says, I'm not going to sleep anymore. So when he says, I shall sleep no more, what does he mean? Think logically about it. Now, Lady Macbeth, we know, is not a huge fan of her husband when he starts acting like a wimp, as she thinks it. She's going to remember the whole plan in this moment, and she has a moment where she realizes he's holding the daggers, and I just love it because she has to really take control of the situation here.
Who was it that thus cried? Why, worthy Thane, you do unbend your noble strength to think so brain-sickly of things. Go get some water and wash this filthy witness from your hand. Why did you bring these daggers from the place? They must lie there. Go, carry them and smear the sleepy grooms with blood.
I'll go no more. I am afraid to think what I have done. Look on't again, I dare not.
Infirm of purpose! Give me the daggers. The sleeping and the dead are but as pictures. 'Tis the eye of childhood that fears a painted devil. If he do bleed, I'll gild the faces of the grooms withal, for it must seem their guilt.
So she realizes he brought the daggers and she says, What are you doing? You idiot. They have to stay there. Like, if we're going to blame them for the murder of Duncan, but they don't have any weapons on them, but he's clearly been stabbed to death, this plan is completely pointless and it's going to all fall apart. You have to go back. Get some water. The blood will wash off. It's fine. But what are you doing? Take them back, smear his guards with blood, make it look like they did the murder. And Macbeth's response is, no, I'm not going back there. I don't want to think about what I did. I don't want to look at what I did. I don't want to see it again. I'm not going to do it anymore. And Lady Macbeth, in this moment, she realizes that she has to protect her family. Because if the daggers don't go back, it's going to be very obvious that the guards did not kill Duncan. And then perhaps suspicion will fall on Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. So she says, just give me the daggers. I'll go do it. And she says to him, the sleeping and the dead are but as pictures. They're like a painting. They, sleeping people, dead people, they just lay there. They don't move. They don't talk. They don't respond. They don't act. It's like looking at a picture. But remember earlier she said, oh, I would have killed him, but he looked like my father while he was sleeping. But because Macbeth has now put them in this situation where really they're going to be found guilty of this crime, she realizes that she has to take control. And she kind of makes fun of him. She's like, ugh, it's just like children that are afraid of people who are sleeping or dead. But she says, give me these. I'll go handle it. And she picks up the daggers and she leaves. Now, Macbeth is going to hear a knocking sound. He doesn't know where it's coming from. He, of course, is going to get very, very stressed out. And he starts to slowly go a little bit crazy in this moment.
Whence is that knocking? How is it with me when every noise appalls me? What hands are here? Ah, they pluck out mine eyes. Will all great Neptune's ocean wash this blood clean from my hand? No. This my hand will rather the multitudinous seas incarnadine, making the green one red.
My hands are of your color, but I shame to wear a heart so white.
So he hears a knocking and he says, "How is it with me when every noise appalls me?" Think about scary movies that you've watched, maybe you yourself. I know I'm scared of everything, so I feel this, where you're already freaked out and you hear a noise. And it's a really innocuous noise. Innocuous meaning it's just something random. It's nothing stressful. It's, maybe something fell on the floor or a tree branch hits your window. But because you're already in a heightened state, it's terrifying and you're convinced that, like there's a murderous clown in your home. Just me? Not anybody else? Okay, cool. But he says, "Oh my gosh, every noise is terrifying to me." And then he sees his hands again. And he says, "Will all great Neptune's ocean," meaning like, Poseidon, god of the sea, "wash this blood clean from my hands?" No. So he says, "My hands are bloodied not just with the actual blood, but with guilt. And no amount of washing will ever clean that stain from my hands." So now, our biggest theme of this play, well, one of the biggest themes, but the idea of guilt. Why do we feel guilt? When do we feel guilt? What happens if we don't feel guilt when we probably should? And what can happen to somebody who becomes overwhelmed with that guilt and doesn't have a way of dealing with it? He says, "No, if I were to try and wash this from my hands right now, all it would do is turn the oceans red with blood as well." Pretty extreme. But then my girl Lady Macbeth shows back up and she says, "Look, my hands are of your color," meaning my hands are now stained with blood as well, "but I shame to wear a heart so white." Are you freaked out, Macbeth? Because I, Lady Macbeth, am not. I would be ashamed if I were as frightened as you. But then there's going to be a knock and she's going to freak out again, too. So, really, she's making fun of him when she herself is also feeling a lot of this as well.
I hear a knocking at the south entry. Retire we to our chamber. A little water clears us of this deed. How easy is it then? Your constancy hath left you unattended. Hark! More knocking. Get on your nightgown, lest occasion call us and show us to be watchers. Be not lost so poorly in your thoughts.
To know my deed, 'twere best not know myself. Wake Duncan with thy knocking. I would thou couldst.
And they exit. Now, the knocking is not imagined. There is someone actually knocking at the door who we will see in scene 3. But at the end of this scene, the last thing Macbeth says, "Wake Duncan with thy knocking. I would thou couldst." He's already regretting murdering Duncan. He says, "I wish that this knocking could wake Duncan up. I wish that this were just, he's sleeping, he's not dead, he wakes up and everything goes back to normal." But there's no going back now. Now, you have a question here to answer, and it's, who would you say is in charge of this relationship? Support your answer with at least 2 pieces of evidence from the text. And I've given you this little extra help blurb if you need to sort of come up with your answer. Does Macbeth give or follow orders? Does Lady Macbeth follow orders? Who does what needs to be done, and what evidence shows that? So, hint, hint, if you tell me Macbeth is in charge of this relationship, I'm just marking this question as wrong. I know I always say you're never wrong if you can prove it, but my God, if you look at the scene and you're like, who's in charge? Macbeth. Lady Macbeth doesn't do anything. I'm not sure what play you're actually reading with me right now. So, what I would like you to do, though, is find some really great examples from this scene and maybe even go back to scene 1 where you're thinking about Macbeth. I know Lady Macbeth's not in that scene, but where Macbeth is still debating actually going through with it, and kind of try and explain to me, how do we know that Lady Macbeth really is the one who's in charge here? And if you're thinking of, maybe going a little bit extra on this, because a lot of you have said you actually are really enjoying this play, which, yay! I'm so sad we're not doing it together in school, but, we're doing the thing. Um, you can really start to think about, what does it tell us about Shakespeare that he writes this very, very powerful female character unabashedly? Think about the time period as well. We're post Queen Elizabeth, she's died, King James has taken over, but this is towards the end of Shakespeare's career. He dies about 10 years after this play premieres. So if you think to his early plays, and now he's grown, he's older, the people he's in relationships with are older, he has a different perspective on women and a different perspective on what it means to be a man. So you can think about that as well.